Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar of the new school year. It's great to have you with us. My name is Adriana. I use she, her pronouns. I work in the admission office with all of these lovely folks that you see here on screen. I'm going to turn things over to start to Camille for an introduction.
Thank you, Adriana. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from around the world. My name is Camille Bouknight. I am the Director of Undergraduate Admission at Emerson College. Just wanted to take a moment to welcome you all and hope that you really take this opportunity to explore and creatively think about how to get your application done utilizing some of the tips and tools that our counselors will share with you today. To keep things sort of going and being respectful of your time, let's jump right in.
All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nick Washburn, Associate Director of Transfer and Veteran Recruitment. Very excited to have all of you here with us today. So we're going to start off by talking about your application options. So you've narrowed down the schools you're interested in. What's the next step? That's submitting an application. And you want to figure out which type of application is going to be best to do that. A lot of you are probably familiar with the Common Application. A lot of schools use this. It's kind of an easy way to submit one application and be able to apply to a lot of schools. There's other applications out there as well, like the Coalition Application, which is similar, but maybe doesn't have as many schools connected to it. And then you have university-specific applications, like Emerson, for example, has an Emerson-specific application. So these are ones that are just directly tied to an individual institution or maybe to a system of schools like SUNY's in New York or something like that. I do want to note Emerson is part of the Common Application. We are not part of the Coalition Application, and we do have our own Emerson-specific application. So you're probably going to hear this a lot tonight, but one of the things you want to make sure that you do is check in with the particular admission office to find out what their preferred method of application is for you. So for Emerson, if you're applying the Common Application or the Emerson specific application, we really don't have a preference. It's whatever you prefer to do. Awesome. So now that you've figured out what type of application you're going to submit, you want to figure out what type of student type you are. And by that, we mean, are you a first-year student or are you a transfer student? So a first-year student typically isn't going to have any courses completed after high school graduation. You may have some dual enrollment courses that you're taking during high school. But it's the big difference is someone who's a transfer is going to have classes that they've taken at a community college, at a four-year institution after graduating high school. So that's one of the big differences there. Again, you're going to want to talk to the particular institutions to make sure that you understand kind of what their requirements are for those categories. So for example, Emerson, if you've completed 9 college credits post-high school graduation or enrolled full-time at another college, you're considered a transfer student. Some institutions, you might have to have completed a full semester of, say, 16 credits. So again, you want to look into that. Another thing to consider as well is the number of credits that might actually transfer into that particular institution. So for example, a new first-time student at Emerson coming in can transfer in a max of 32 credits. A transfer student can transfer in a maximum of 80 credits, depending on the institution that they're coming from. So those are important pieces of information to know as you're going through that process and which application and student type you are. Another question that we get a lot is whether it's if it's better, if you will, to apply, say, early decision versus early action versus regular decision. So early decision is a binding form of admission. So you should only be applying early decision to an institution if you know 100% that you're going to attend, regardless of whatever your aid package might look like. Early action, on the other hand, is non-binding, similar to regular decision, but what it's going to do is allow you the opportunity to get your decision a little bit earlier. For a lot of schools, their early action, you can get your decision prior to your winter break, so you don't have to worry about kind of using, say, that time in order to fill out applications. And then regular decision is more of, say, the traditional kind of application deadline. Maybe it's early January, mid-January. And this is going to give you a little bit more opportunity if you want to show an upward trend in your academics. If you just want a little bit more time to get your application together, maybe you want to go visit some schools. And again, regular decision is a non-binding form of admission. And then I do want to mention test optional. So a lot of institutions nowadays are test optional. So you might not have to submit standardized test scores like the ACT or the SAT. For Emerson, we are fully test optional. So it's completely up to you whether or not you want to submit those test scores. I always like to say that if you don't feel like your test scores are an accurate representation of who you are academically, then it's probably best to go test optional. And it's not something that we're going to hold against you at all by applying test optional. But again, you just want to talk to the colleges that you're interested to figure out what their requirements are when we're looking at the application. Are they test optional? Are they not? To determine exactly what you want to go ahead and submit there.
All right, thank you so much, Nick. So my name is Dan Riley. I am one of our admission counselors here at our Office of Undergraduate Admission at Emerson College. And in addition to that, I'm actually also an alumni. So I graduated Emerson in 2021. I studied and obtained my BFA in theater education and performance. So much like all of you, I went through this application process specifically for Emerson not too long ago. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about the activities section. So this is the part of the application where you're really able to elaborate and talk all about your obligations, extracurricular activities, clubs, or other organizations that have really added value and growth to your overall high school experience. When our team reviews applications, we really emphasize a good rule of thumb is quality over quantity, and we really emphasize sustainment and growth within the organization that you're a part of. We also really emphasize leadership and active participation in all of these organizations. So for instance, if we look at a sport or activity like soccer, there's a really big difference between a student who was a member of the JV soccer team for maybe 1 to 2 years in high school and then fell out of it versus a student who was a member of a junior varsity soccer team for freshman year, moved up to varsity during sophomore year, became an assistant captain during junior year, and finally became captain of the team during senior year. So this growth really indicates to us development, active participation, and strong leadership level impact within that student's activity. It's important to know that we do recognize that extracurricular involvement has looked very different over the past few years, and that going forward, it may continue to do so due to many of the restrictions that came from the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and other community disruptions. But ultimately, we want you all as high school students, transfer students, to really include the things that you are engaged in and passionate about. These can be opportunities through volunteerism, athletics, art clubs, part-time jobs, and even family responsibilities and other obligations that you may have in your home life as well. One of the most frequently asked questions we do get when it comes to activities is, do I need to submit additional materials like a resume or a portfolio? At Emerson College, there are certain programs where our students are required to submit a portfolio, such as our Global BFA in Film Arts, and also our BFA Theatrical Design and Production major requires a portfolio and review and interview. We also have a program like our Media Arts Production major, which, while it's not a mandatory component, we do encourage students to submit a digital portfolio. But regardless of what major you're applying for, all students have the opportunity to take advantage of submitting resumes and portfolios to our admissions staff. If they would like to do so, there's opportunities for the student to really showcase who they are as a creator, an innovator, and an artist. We've had business of creative enterprise students and also marketing communication students submit mock business ideas and concepts. Some of them have sent over graphic design samples. We've had our creative writing applicants submit short stories, poetry. We've even had sports communication students submit other forms of media like podcasts as their form of portfolio. So it's really up to the student, and it really allows them a lot of creative control and showcase other areas that wouldn't normally get the opportunity to be shown during their application process. Now, there is also a section of your application where you're able to elaborate on additional information. This is not a mandatory part of the application process, but we do have many students who do take advantage of it. So for instance, if there's information that you would like to share with us that doesn't really fit into another part of your application, you can do so in the additional information section. In the past, we've had some students elaborate on medical challenges, academic roadblocks, mental health challenges, recent familial losses, academic accommodations such as 504 and IEIP plans that they've utilized in high school. So it can be used for reasons such as those, but it can also be used to other personal related matters such as extracurricular accomplishments. Maybe you have a personal website that you want to share with us. Maybe you have personal achievements in the form of YouTube or Vimeo videos that you want to share with us. You can do so through that additional information section. Now, the community disruption section, on the other hand, really helps our staff get a better understanding of how difficult community events and disasters, such as natural disasters or, again, COVID-19, have impacted you throughout your academic career in high school. So there's an opportunity for you to elaborate on any of those types of challenges in that section as well. And then finally, when it comes to additional documents such as letters of recommendation, at Emerson College for new first-time students, we do require 2 letters of recommendation. One of those is going to come from a high school guidance counselor, and the other one's going to come from a teacher of a core subject. And we define a core subject as English, math, science, social studies, or world language. Again, there are also some variances on those requirements depending on the other colleges or universities you may be applying to. So it's always really important to check in with them. And then for transfer students who are applying at Emerson, we do require an academic recommendation from a current college professor. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Maddie Ryan for our personal essay section.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. My name is Madeline Ryan, and I'm an associate director and coordinator for multicultural recruitment. So it's great to see all of the different places each of you are joining us from today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the personal essay. So really, this is going to be one of the components of an application where you really get to be creative. You get to highlight your voice. And this is going to really be important for institutions that do a holistic review. So there will be some institutions that if you have a specific GPA or test score, if it is required at that institution, you can be automatically admitted just based on those elements. However, other institutions like Emerson, we're going to do a holistic review. So we're going to look at multiple documents that you're going to share with us. So the application, essays, your letters of recommendation, maybe test scores, things like that, to make that review. So we, as your admissions counselors, are going to be looking at you in the context of your high school. So we're going to know the available course offerings and everything that you're able to take. And then we're going to look at each of the different components that you've shared with us. So just speaking more specifically about the essay, this is going to be a chance for us to kind of get a glimpse of who you are, apart from other sections that you've already shared information. So you want to really use your own voice. You want to highlight how you can contribute to the overall campus community. So how will you be able to fit among our students and faculty and staff on campus? And then also, when you're thinking about your essays, you want to note the COVID-19 question that a lot of institutions are now asking. So how may or may not, but if you were impacted because of COVID, you're learning, if you had any challenges, whether they're emotional, mental health challenges, certainly speak to that so that we can understand and we can get a full picture of who you are apart from the other sections of the application. and a little bit more. So you're going to want to make sure that you're sticking to the prompt. So each of the essays will have a certain word count, and they'll have a topic. So sometimes you get really excited, you want to share a lot of information, but do make sure that you are going back and checking your essay, making sure that you're having several people review it before you submit. So maybe a parent or guardian, counselor, a mentor, whomever you think will be the best person to who knows you well, so they can really make sure that your voice is shining through in your essays. Make sure that you are sticking to the topic and the prompt, and that you are following that word count. So maybe you're going to write in a Word document and then copy and paste. Make sure that that full essay is being pasted in your essay. And then differentiate yourself. So we are reading hundreds to thousands of applications in a relatively short amount of time. So we want to make sure that you are taking this time through your essays to help us learn more about you. So again, like I said, maybe in the extracurriculars or other sections of your application, you've alluded to some of the experiences, whether they're internships, if you're working, if you support your family in any way. Put all of this in your essays so that we can hear who you are. We can kind of get a more clear picture of who you are and what your experiences are and how you can contribute to the overall campus community. Tell your story. So be creative. Share something funny if that is your talent. If you're going to be a comedian or one of our acting majors, you want to kind of use that talent in your essays as well. If you have some type of personal experience or story based on your time visiting Emerson or Boston or in your hometown or country, whatever it might be that kind of helps, again, differentiate yourself, you'll want to do that in your essay. And then be sincere. We're not expecting you to, be a famed author at this point, but we do want you to kind of highlight who you are and how we can help you get to that next level. So that's what we're looking for, really, is to make sure that Emerson and all the academic opportunities will help you with your career goals.
Thanks, Maddie. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca. I also work in the undergraduate admission office here at Emerson. So we talked about what we recommend including in your essay and your application, some things to keep in mind to stay away from, rehashing what's already written somewhere else. So if you told us all about a competition you were in or something like that in your activity section, then you don't need to rewrite all of those accomplishments in your essay. We'll see it, we will read it in the other section. Use that space, like Maddie said, to tell us more about yourself and who you are. Really, please avoid having someone else write portions of your essays. So at Emerson, we asked for 3 essays in total with our supplemental essays. And we as admission counselors can tell the difference if one of your essays sounds very different than another one. So we really want to make sure that your voice is coming through across all of those essays. So we hear from students all the time how stressful and challenging it can be, especially just to get started on writing your essay. You might have writer's block, you might just be really nervous. Some things, quick tips to consider are start early. You can always go back and review, rewrite. Sometimes just writing, setting a timer for yourself, getting some words on paper just gets those kind of juices flowing. Keep writing, don't worry about getting it perfect the first time. Just write, and then you can always go back and edit. Brainstorm, think about the story that you want to tell, and use the tools that you learned probably in high school, things like your spider webs and things like that. Really use those to get those ideas together before you sit down and write. And like I said, you can always go back and edit. So actually, I think we're gonna go to questions now.
Yep, and I think we can sit on that last slide while we do that for a moment. We're going to be answering some questions, so definitely don't go anywhere. But if you do want to get in touch with us, these are some of the ways that you can do that. We will always answer via the admission email. It's the best way to get in touch with us. But if you kind of want to follow along with some goings on, some things from our students, feel free to check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and our admission sponsored podcast, although it's not admission topics, it's all student engagement related. So definitely feel free to check those out. I think maybe what we can do is we can bring down the screen for now, and we'll share this again at the end. If I could encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A box, that would be super helpful for us. It'll just help us keep track of everything. That way we don't miss any of your questions. And don't worry if we don't answer it right away. There'll be kind of a method to the madness. We will get to your question. Absolutely. All right, so let's start, I think, back at the beginning. So Nick, since you talked about this, if a student wants to apply to a college for early decision and they don't get into that college, because you're only applying to one college early decision, remember, can they apply to that college again during regular decision, or is that kind of the end of the road there?
So it's, you're going to look at each individual institution, but typically if you're applying early decision and you do not receive admission, that's going to be kind of your decision for that particular institution. However, you do have the opportunity where you can apply to additional institutions. So for example, if you are applying early decision to one institution and you apply to another institution as early action, say, or regular decision, that's okay. What would just happen is if you are admitted early decision, then you would need to withdraw your applications from those other institutions.
Great, thank you. Let's actually jump to the essay real quick, and then we'll come back to some activities questions. Maddie, can you just talk about, what are admission counselors looking for in that essay? Is there something specific that we're looking for people to touch on, or is it kind of really up to the individual?
Yeah, great question. So it is going to be up to the individual. So remembering to stick to the prompt. So most institutions will have multiple essays. So one of them might be to speak more about your academic interests and major. So at Emerson, we do really want to see that you've done what we consider demonstrated interest. So you've taken a look at maybe the course curriculum or some of the professors who might be teaching your class, some of the experiential learning opportunities, so study abroad, internships. We want to know that you've kind of already done some research to see that we can help you get to that next level, like I said before, and put all of that in the essay. We don't expect you to have everything planned out, 5-10 years from now, but just that you can see yourself as a student at Emerson. You can see us, all students, faculty, and staff, helping you advance in your career as well. And then, as I shared before too, just highlighting a little bit more about who you are. So tell us if you have had a great experience in high school that has helped you in terms of your academic growth, if it has helped you in terms of your personal growth as well, your maturity, if you are quite autonomous and independent, maybe you are the oldest sibling and you're helping care for younger siblings, helping them complete their coursework, and maybe cooking, cleaning. So really just kind of letting us see all that you're balancing and juggling, both in the classroom, through your extracurricular activities, and then personally as well.
And a lot of folks also asking, like, should they or do they need to talk about their intended major in their essays?
Yes, so most institutions will have one essay in particular that really does ask you to speak about your intended major. Emerson, we do, certainly. So yes, you will have a prompt where maybe you can be a little bit more creative and kind of choose a direction that you want to take your topic and your writing style. And then you'll have others that are a little bit more specific that say, yes, please speak about your major, what you want to study, highlight anything you've done in high school that maybe could be a great foundation for that major, certainly. So if you're a business interested in BCE, Business of Creative Enterprise at Emerson, and you've participated in DECA or journalism or media classes, things like that can really kind of add to that foundation.
And I think actually a question that might help shed some light on kind of the difference between some of the prompts that are available to students, because there are different ones that some of them are Common App, some of them are Emerson. Can you talk about the different prompts and what a Common App essay or a general college essay might look like versus an institution-specific question like Emerson?
Yeah, sure, I can continue. Yep, no problem. So you actually have access to the Common App prompts and many of the institution prompts as well, since we are past August 1st. Some of them might open a little bit later in September, but you can start with the Common App. So you get, I believe there are 2 essays with Common App, and many times you can choose which one you want to select, which one you think you can speak to best, or where you can be the most creative or highlight your voice the best. So I would start there, like Rebecca was saying, at least kind of get your juices flowing, feel a little bit more comfortable and confident, knowing that this essay will be one that you're going to send to any institution that you're applying to through the Common App. So that's really a good one to start with. And then from there, you can usually tweak or tailor your additional essays based on what that specific school is asking. So our Emerson application is open as well for fall. And so you can go ahead and look at our essay questions and then do some edits or some drafts. And again, like I said, just have some really solid essays that work well. And then depending on the other institutions, you might be able to just adjust them a little bit. But again, you'll want to make sure that you are making sure that you're answering that specific institution's essay questions and not just copying and pasting from another institution, because they might differ a little bit.
That is a great point. And one person did ask about common mistakes, and we can come back to that more in full, but I would say one of those is, yeah, make sure that you're addressing the school that you think you're addressing, and just make sure you answer the question. Honestly, that's 90% of it, is making sure you address the question that's being asked, because it's being asked for a reason, and we want to know that information about you. Dan, let's come to you next. Some students are wondering, there's an area they might have become interested in more recently. So maybe they've just gotten involved in something because they've just found their passion for that area. Is that going to hurt their application? Will not having, say, like a portfolio in that area hurt their application? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So again, when it comes to experience levels with extracurriculars, we have students coming from all different walks of life, and part of our application review process, as Maddie talked about, is a very holistic approach. So we have access to elements such as a secondary school profile. So for instance, if we see in your school profile that you might not necessarily have, a film club or, a performing arts department, but you're taking advantage of other community-oriented opportunities such as community theater, maybe film clubs outside, but only at a more recent level, we can definitely pick up on that through the application review process. Again, I think it's also really important to keep in mind when we are reviewing applications, we recognize that students also have other responsibilities. It's not just extracurricular organizations. Sometimes they may have to be taking care of family members due to hardships. Sometimes they may be having to work part-time jobs to help support their families. So again, when it comes to joining an organization later on in the college experience, because it was something that you might not necessarily have had access to early on, we have our ways and resources to, check that and make sure that you're being supported as best as you can. So overall, I would say don't worry too much about how long you've been in an organization for. I think it's really important to make the most of the impact in the organization the moment you join it. So, if you're joining an organization later on in your high school career, really take advantage of those opportunities, find ways to be an active participant and find ways to be a leader, because those are the big things that we're looking for when it comes to your application process overall. Ultimately, we want to make sure that you're a student who is able to succeed, thrive, and flourish in a college environment.
Can I add to that too? I think Dan did a great job answering, and you made me think of something else. But you also want to make sure that we do know if you had any of those additional responsibilities. So not just leaving it blank in the extracurriculars or leaving it not addressing it in the essays, but do please let us know, okay, you were taking care of family members, you were working part-time, things like that we can't necessarily get from that high school profile, or sometimes the high school counselor will let us know that, but just it's always best to let us know on your end as well.
And just very quickly to piggyback on that as well, I gotta give some love to my transfer students here and know that when it comes to extracurricular activities, when we're looking at transfer students, you can go back through not just college, but to high school as well. Or maybe if you had any sort of gaps in there, that could be work, that could be family responsibilities, volunteering, things like that. So, we want to make sure to give you credit for your involvement that you have, because we know it takes up so much time.
Rebecca, a couple of questions for you. We kind of mentioned at the top that we are test optional. So sometimes that's a part of considering a student's application, sometimes not. And many schools are test optional as well. Can you explain, how do we evaluate some applications with test scores and some of them without?
Sure. So, like Maddie said earlier, we review applications holistically. So that means that there's not going to be, a certain percent of each piece of your application that's going to equal any specific grade or anything like that. We're looking at your application as a full picture. So if you choose not to send your test scores because you don't think they're a great representation of what you can do academically, then we're just going to use what we have. So we're going to look at your academic history, your grades in school. If you do send them, then we'll take them into consideration, but we're, like Nick said earlier, not penalizing you for not sending those grades. It's just going to kind of give us one more data point to look at as we're reviewing your entire application.
And then can you also talk a little bit more about letters of recommendation? There's a few different questions, some about, okay, we require 2 recommendations. Can students submit more than that? And how should they go about choosing who to ask for a recommendation, or which ones to submit if, say, their school requires them to get, X number of recommendations?
Sure, great question. So yes, we require 2. You can submit technically as many as you want, though I would recommend capping it at around 3. We read all of those. So if we have 4 or 5 letters of recommendation to read, that takes a long time. So it's really best if you stick to around 3 if you really want to submit an extra one. I would recommend asking teachers who know you well and who are going to be able to speak specifically to you, because there are a lot of letters of recommendation we read where, it's a very general letter that could be written about lots of different students. So some teachers even will let you kind of give them a bulleted list of things that you did while you were in their class or something like that to remind them. That can be really helpful. But really someone who is going to have something specific to say about you. And then if if you're a performing arts student and you want to have your musical theater teacher or something, someone that's really specifically related to your major, that's always great. But ultimately, I wouldn't spend so much time worrying about if the person is like perfect for your major, and spend more time thinking about who you have a good relationship with, who is going to get it done for you. So your application isn't incomplete as you wait for that one last letter of recommendation, and who is going to write a really personal letter for you.
Great. Nick, could you talk a little bit about, the particular example given here is a student was talking about being advised to not talk about COVID on their applications, even though it impacted their high school experience. Maybe to that specifically, but also just in general, should students be writing about, experiences that have somehow impacted them in a specific way?
Yeah, so I mean, I think some people out there might say, there's topics that are off limits, but I think if there's something that's really, meaningful or impactful to you, that is impacted you, from a school perspective, from a social perspective, from a home perspective, then I would recommend talking about that. The level of depth that you get into is up for debate, but I think it's important to provide us with context to say, if this is a kind of a bump in the road that I had in high school because of COVID and we went to online classes, sure, we're going to get a lot of essays that maybe have some similarities there, but the important thing to remember is that you want to put your voice through. So if it's coming through your voice, it's going to stand out. So I think, talking about COVID isn't inherently, a bad essay topic or something to bring up as an additional information, but I think it's the context in which you do that. And if it's providing additional information for us to understand who you are, then I would say go ahead for that. And pretty much any other kind of essay topic, I would say the same thing for.
I've heard some great advice around that as well, in terms of, we all know that COVID and some other kind of pretty prominent community disruptions have had an impact on, say, abilities to be involved or, being in remote classes or things like that. So we don't necessarily need to know that information, but, like Nick was saying, if it's impacted you kind of personally in a very specific way, that's, to you specifically, that is what would be great to know about, and that we would certainly encourage you to write about. I just wanted to address the topic of kind of portfolios really quick, because we don't have the capacity to get into those in depth during this session. There are going to be some other webinars coming up that'll get more into some of those questions. For example, next week we're doing all things performing arts and artistic reviews. But there were a number of questions, so I did want to at least mention this. We do have some guidelines for those majors that either require artistic reviews or portfolio reviews. You can find them on our website. In the chat now, we're going to put the guidelines for media art production specifically, since that is the one major where we do kind of encourage you but don't require you to submit a portfolio. So if you have questions about what to include in those, that is the best resource for those. For us at Emerson, you're submitting portfolios right through your application portal with us. Performing arts has a slightly different process, which we'll talk about next week in using Accepted, to make sure you sign up for that webinar. But anything else comes right through us, right through our admission portal. Different schools might use different platforms. You might have heard of SlideRoom before. There are others out there. But for Emerson, it's just our admission portal. Just make sure to check with the school you're applying to, and they can direct you to where you should be sent. Let's see. Who haven't I picked on in a little bit? Dan, can you talk about, this question is regarding, maybe a school doesn't have a lot of options available. I think we maybe started to touch on this, but maybe a little more in depth. So maybe there's not a lot of AP classes available, not a lot of organizations. Does that affect a student's ability to be admitted?
Yeah, of course. I could definitely talk about that. When it comes to, for instance, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about that secondary school profile. So we have access to all of the levels of rigor that are accessible to you at your high school. So that includes AP, if your high school is on an AP curriculum, if your high school is on an international baccalaureate curriculum, if your high school doesn't offer either of those and it may be just honors courses in CP, we have access to that information. So when our team is reviewing applications, we spend some time reviewing that secondary school profile so that we have that information. And then when we look into your application, we're really wanting to see if you're taking advantage of what is accessible to you within your high school community. There's also other ways to take advantage of college level courses outside of your high school through dual enrollment opportunities through local community colleges. And then also if you happen to have pre-college programs through local four-year institutions in your area, that's another opportunity that you could take advantage of. While we are on the topic of AP, IB courses, we do evaluate rigor as one of those components when we are taking in students' applications into consideration. Similarly to what I was saying earlier, we really want to make sure that students are preparing themselves and taking advantage of college level courses, again, that are accessible to them, so that when they do come to a college like Emerson, they're able to be prepared and have that those resources and preparation needed to succeed, thrive, and be successful in our college community.
Great, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much for all of these questions. We're going to continue on with a few more of these. So if you have any last ones, feel free to submit those through the Q&A box. Let's do get back to essays for just a second. So Maddie, we have a question about the essays. Do we feel like there's a small amount of stories or experiences we want students to focus on rather, and kind of come at it from a simple angle, or do we want to hear kind of every story that the student can think to tell us about?
Great question. So that word count is going to be important. So you don't usually have that much space to really tell us every story. So you're going to want to use the one that can be the most impactful, that will highlight your voice the best, but also your experiences. So a little bit of everything. We're telling you to kind of put everything you can into this one essay. But again, then you're kind of limited in what you can really put in there. So take, practice, start writing, like Rebecca said earlier, kind of see where you go, how much you can get into it, but make sure that you are actually getting to the point. So sometimes somebody or a student can get really excited and have a lot to share, but then we're kind of left without having that conclusion. So make sure you can give us the full picture, that full story, within your essay response as well. So hopefully I answered that question.
Actually, a great follow-up question, which is how can I avoid some of those college essay cliches? What if I can't tell if mine sounds corny or not?
Yeah, well, honestly, again, we're asking you to highlight your voice and what's important to you in your essays. So don't worry if it's corny. I will say that because of where we are, we have read a lot of essays about the impact of COVID-19. We've seen a lot of stories and essays about mental health challenges and things like that. So again, don't worry that other students might be writing about the same topic or content. We understand that a lot of these are universal experiences, but maybe do try to think, okay, what's something that I can speak to that might make me a little bit more unique, that might make me stand out, because those are going to be the essays that do stay with us a little bit longer, but again, can also help us see who you are in a different way other than what you've already highlighted in each of the other sections and components of your application.
I would love to add one of the things you perhaps can avoid. It's great to use tools like the internet to maybe help jumpstart some of your brainstorming, but I wouldn't necessarily advise using it to pull your topic or your essay directly. A lot of my colleagues are smiling and nodding because they know, in particular, there's one question that we have. I'll give you the sneak peek here. If you're applying to our honors program, please don't Google common or popular metaphors to answer a question about metaphors, because we know what's on that list. So if you use that list to answer the question, that's okay if you have a real meaningful and genuine connection to something that you have looked up or you need a little help getting started, but make sure you still make it your own. Because once we start seeing the same prompts and the same answers over and over again, it does lose a bit of that individuality. So use your tools and resources to get started, but make sure you keep it your own. All
just
right.
along those lines. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to add a little quick thought as well, just along those lines, is I think it's really important, when it comes to essays as well, is don't write what you think we want to hear. Be true to yourself. Again, we've said this, kind of over and over. But when it's your voice, when it's truly you, then that's going to come through and that's going to stand out. So don't write what you think it is that such and such school wants to hear. Write what's true to you and what connects to you personally.
All right. So we're starting to come around towards the end here. We have time for just a couple more. actually, Nick, if you don't mind keeping going, if someone has a project that perhaps is something they're working on, but it hasn't come to fruition just yet, what's the best way for that for them to include that in their application if they feel like it's an important thing that's going to really showcase some of their plans and abilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that is really important if you're looking at submitting, say, a portfolio, creative sample, is demonstrating your storytelling kind of capabilities. And you can see that through different iterations of your projects. So it may be that you're in your first or second draft of something, and it's not quite where you want it to be, but it's also showing kind of who you are as a storyteller. That can be very beneficial in order to do that. One of the things that I would also recommend is you have an opportunity, depending on when you're applying. We talk about early decision, early action, regular decision. If you are applying a little bit later on, there is an opportunity to reach out to our office and to upload additional material. So if you do have that kind of additional iteration of a piece, something that you want looked at, or even if it's updated information as far as an internship that you got or something along those lines, you can always reach out directly to your admissions counselor to provide that updated information, just to make sure that we're getting kind of the best look at who you are academically, and then creatively as well. So hopefully that answered it.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Just to answer kind of one more question here, and then I'd love to hear from everybody briefly on this last one. For folks wondering, that we often get questions about general resumes versus performing arts resumes. When we're asking you to fill out that activities section, or if you want to submit a resume, that is for your general resume. We want to see kind of the breadth of things you were involved in high school. There will be an opportunity through Accepted, if you're applying to a performing arts major, to include your performing arts resume if you'd like, or you can include it in addition to your regular resume if you'd like us to see it. But make sure you do touch on some of those general things that you've been involved in, those activities and other things that have been part of your experience, because we'd like to see kind of all of them and not just the performing arts ones. All right, so from everybody, I would love to hear the following. We've actually talked about some of the mistakes that folks make that might affect their application, but what's one piece of advice that you would encourage someone to take that would help in their application process generally, not necessarily just for Emerson, but throughout this whole process? What would you advise them to do? Rebecca, we'll start with you.
So I guess my biggest piece of advice for applications in general would be to keep some kind of spreadsheet, or however you like to stay organized, with the different requirements for each school that you're applying to, because they're all going to be different. And if you miss one requirement at many schools, your application is not going to be complete and you're not going to get a response from that school. So it can be really hard to keep track of if I need a portfolio here, or if I need an extra essay here. Put them all in one spreadsheet or notebook or whatever you prefer to use, and start tracking it early so you don't get lost.
Yeah, I would definitely say one of my biggest takeaways and piece of advice for prospective students would be take advantage of your resources through your school community and also your admission staff too. We're here to assist you. We're here to help you. I know sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating being a high school student and reaching out to an admission representative, but we are here to help you through this process and make sure that you are set up for success ultimately. So whether that may be connecting with one of us when we go out on our recruitment journeys this upcoming fall, at a high school visit, at a college fair, if you are coming over to our campus to learn more about our facilities and resources, if you're attending an open house, all of these are indicating continued interest and demonstrated interest in the Emerson College community. Even if you are reaching out to us and want to schedule a one-on-one Zoom meeting, we have opportunities for you to connect with students on our campus. We call them student ambassadors. We have plenty of opportunities for you to really learn about the Emerson College community and culture. So I highly recommend taking advantage of those, even if they may be a little bit intimidating and out of the comfort zone at times. That's definitely a really important process during your admissions journey.
So I would add that you will want to make sure that you use an email on your applications that you have access to. You know, the password, you can log in, and to do so regularly. So we are often, as your admissions counselors, are often reaching out to you for additional documentation, for questions sometimes about something that you've submitted within your application. So in order to allow us to best review you and in a timely manner, to make sure that you are able to meet your deadlines as well, and that your application isn't either rejected altogether or pushed to another application period, please, please, please check those emails and get back to us as soon as you can, so that we can continue the review process in a timely manner as well.
And if I could just follow up on that, a lot of your school email addresses do not accept incoming outside emails. So I don't use your school email address unless you really have to, or you might miss out. That's really good advice, Maddie.
So I just, Dan kind of, I think, hit the nail on the head with one of the things that he said, and I'm just going to reiterate it before I say something else, is you can look at the screen here, and we're all resources for you. So 100%, if you have any questions, any concerns, reach out to the admissions counselor at your particular institution that you're interested in. That's what we're there for. It's much better to reach out with a small question, even if it seems insignificant, than for you to be kind of anxious about whether or not to do something. With that said, I think one of the most important things to do while you're going through the application process, I know it's very stressful, especially if you're applying to a lot of schools, you obviously want to take your time and don't kind of procrastinate too much, but it's also okay to just take a deep breath. This is a process, and you're going to get through it. And it seems like sometimes you're hitting all these deadlines all at once, but if you start in advance and you give yourself time, you can take a breath, you can take a break when you hit those little bit of roadblocks, say when you have an essay, and you can get your first draft done. You can go back to it then afterwards. So just take a breath as you're going through this process as well.
Finally, I would just say to have fun with this. This is the one time in your life that you're really able to brag about who you are, what you've done. So don't be humble. And also make sure that you give your school counselors grace. They have a lot of you, I'm sure you know, but they are doing their best and are going to be uploading those documents when they get the opportunity to do that as things are updated. So make sure that as you're looking at your checklists within the portal that you'll have access to, especially at Emerson, you'll also have that portal access at a number of other institutions, that you give them at least 2 weeks to upload any missing materials that they might be responsible for. After that 2 weeks, if you still see that red X, then I would certainly reach out to the admission office and then reach out to your counselor.
All wonderful pieces of advice. I'll add just one more while Rebecca brings back up those last couple of slides for everyone to see again. You, as the student, are the driver in this process. You are the one who is doing, a lot of the work to submit these applications. There's a lot for you to keep track of, but this is your college experience. So the ball is in your court. Feel free, if you have any questions, as everyone said, you can always reach out to us. This is how you can get a hold of us. You can always use this email. We did just add a link in the chat to our Meet the Counselor page. Just a note with that, we are kind of moving a couple things around. So if we direct you to a new person, don't worry. We will get you to where we need you to go. But feel free also, as I mentioned earlier, to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. There's some great information as well as student-driven content, the podcast as well. And then there's a few more links that I'm posting in the chat to go along with this information. So we do have some open houses coming up. If you would like to visit us on campus, the open houses are a great opportunity to do that. Those registrations will be available soon by email. We'll send you an email when they're up. They're not up quite yet, but we will let you know. If you can't make it on those dates, that is okay. We did post the visit link and it is there in the chat now. Again, you can come and visit us anytime and take a tour, and we'd be happy to chat with you, and our students will be happy to chat with you. Or you can always visit us virtually. So we have some virtual info sessions. We have that virtual open house week, which will have a lot more content for you to be able to explore. And then, we're always happy to figure out a way for you to visit, whether that's in person or online. One more link in the chat that we just posted. All of our upcoming webinars are always going to be posted to that link. So anything that is on the calendar will be ready at that link for you to register for. We are adding things all the time. So check early, check often, and make sure to register for whatever you'd like to attend. Even if you can't make it live, we will email you these recordings a week after the sessions, whether you're able to come or not. So just registering means you'll get the recording by email. So feel free to sign up for those. We hope to see you. And if not, you'll always get the recording. I want to thank all of our staff for all the wonderful information they shared tonight. I want to thank all of you for attending and for asking such wonderful questions. Thank you so much. And hopefully we will see you at the next one. Thanks, everyone.